Okay, welcome to the live stream. I hope everyone enjoyed the last video we just premiered. I'm going to check the live stream, please. I just want to make sure everything is working accordingly. Okay, welcome to the live stream. So it looks like it is. So, the video I just showed was describing a video that Michael Jackson, a home movie that Michael Jackson did with two boys that most people could probably figure out who they are. Dylan Howard essentially basically gave every breadcrumb you can think of to let people know what was going on. What I think needs to happen is that video needs to be located and released. And I said that in the actual video of the two boys, one camcorder, two boys, and a monster. And I think that it's very important that that happens because the biggest the detractors essentially will continually say, well, there is no video evidence, it's just testimony, yada, yada, yada. That's not what's important about this particular situation. What's important is that that Michael Jackson acted inappropriately, and as Ron Zonen said in the video, hopefully you just watched, that Michael Jackson would essentially do this all the time to create an environment where children felt that they had to keep secrets. That's essentially what that is Michael Jackson essentially would create a environment where this would flourish. I will take questions tonight. It's not going to be a super long live stream tonight. I will take questions if you have them. I'm going to, again, and I'm going to be going over, I'll tell you what we're going to be going over tonight, just so you know. We're going to be talking about Grace Rhuwamba, who was Michael Jackson's babysitter, shocking, and has stated a couple of things about the Cassios, which I thought was rather bizarre. Why she would even get involved in this point is just ridiculous. We're also going to be talking about Taj Jackson and his so-called documentary / series that he now is essentially going to be promoting as a series and not like a heavy-hitting documentary. I think some of that might be because of legal situations. We're going to be quickly looking at a video that I covered in in the last video, which is Ron Zonen on a show called The View. He did 3 parts to that. So it's like a 3-part series. He first interviewed Charles Thompson, who is a Michael Jackson sycophant and has written about Michael Jackson for years. He then went on to interview Aphrodite Jones, and then after that, the brilliant I think his Hassan Ali, I think his name is, decided to interview Ron Zonen, and with Ron Zonen, he began to ask difficult questions. Yes, I did see somebody on here, nosy fella, Grace the nanny. Aldo Cascio essentially finally got frustrated with Grace, which I don't know why anyone wouldn't. You are a nanny for Michael Jackson, and the fact that you are, coming out there and making these comments is utterly ridiculous. My question would be, is anyone paying you to say these things? Is anyone paying you to put out this garbage? You should be ashamed of yourself. You should say, you know what, even if you saw nothing, your response would be, you know what, I really cared about Michael Jackson. I believe he didn't do anything. But the reality is that he, I don't know. And I'm not going to, if these children were victims, I'm not going to insert myself in a situation where I'm actually, contributing to their shame and vitriol. I think it's just utterly ridiculous. We'll be going over that. I'll be making a little bit of some humorous comments about both of those individuals. I think someone just wrote, in the video, the content is very suggestive. Yes, so in the video I just premiered, so if, obviously I think most people, there's not a whole lot of people in the live right now, but most people probably have just seen it. And the reality is that if you're, the purpose of why that video needs to be shown is to show how irresponsible Michael Jackson was with children. I stressed, he's a parent at this point. He's 41. He knows to protect his own children's faces by putting on veils and making sure that they're safe. But yet when it's somebody else's children, that all gets thrown out the window. And now he is just going to record this for what? What is the purpose of it? Why do you need to record every single moment you have? And the man that said, I see God in the eyes of children, their innocence and blah, 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 blah. But yet you're subverting their innocence and creating something that's rather sickening. If you really are that sort of enamored with children's innocence and things like that, why would you want them to be filmed talking about women's breasts and where you're going to get your milk and you like it warm and all this other ridiculous stuff, and then putting on some sort of bizarre, martyr type play where you're actually allowing these children to swear left, right, and center and talking about blackmailing people. What is... It's ridiculous. It's odd. It's, is it criminal? No. But like in the last clip that I played in that video with Louis Theroux, sometimes you need to ask for just, beyond, is it just criminal? That people's behavior needs to be questioned further than that. Technically, Jimmy Savile, who is now been accused over 100 plus times, of abusing women, children, boys, whatever. He's accused of almost everything. He has never been convicted. So do we say, well, he wasn't convicted? And in that, in the last video, I was talking about Hassan Ali. A lot of the arguments he uses where Ron Zonen's pushing him, saying, well, what do you think a grown man's doing in bed with an unrelated child for night after night after night? And it sounds like, I don't know. I have no idea. Which is, again, this is just ridiculous. But I digress. Let me go on to the next scene here. So, unfortunately, the Cassios did not win in their court case, and it's going back to arbitration. What I find rather interesting is that all the people in the Michael Jackson cult seem to think it's a victory, that somehow the estate, who had already paid for their quote-unquote life rights, is now going to be handled in a boardroom with nobody around, and it's going to be done in secrecy. That to them is a victory, which is outrageous. And no way is a victory. That is actually quite the opposite. What the estate is saying is that we don't want anyone to see our negotiations. And in the reality was when they first bought off their quote-unquote life rights, it was done in secrecy. And it was only because of the way they handled it that it came forward, and essentially the state, at least in my opinion, outed the Cassios because they knew it was going to become front and center. And they had already had some issues with the Lionsgate Michael Jackson infomercial biopic, where they were Lionsgate was finding out about, the Chandler clause that was in the first settlement that somehow they have amnesia on. And now they're, this is going to be coming forward and no one's telling them. So they try to head it off, and essentially, I think, Attorney John Branca, gave some interviews and essentially, even though he didn't fully release their names, essentially gave enough information for people to find out what was going on. So it reads here, Michael Jackson estate wins round as judge orders arbitration in Cascio siblings trafficking case. The judge ruled that while the siblings' allegations are horrific, the court lacked discretion to hear the case. I am glad she put that note in there, because what happens is people say, oh, well, see, they lost. No, they didn't lose. Their allegations weren't disproven. She just said because of the essentially agreement they signed previously, that essentially more than likely was completely airtight, that they have to go back to arbitration. And she has no way of bypassing that. So let's go to the next slide, which goes a little bit further. Before Del Cascio siblings, who allege Michael Jackson sexually abused them, on interstate and international trips when they have lost their bid for public trial of their child trafficking claim and must instead go to private arbitration with Jackson's estate, a federal judge has ruled. Just a quick note here, my recommendation is now start going after the does that might possibly part of this as well. My view is someone made a good point about the Jeffrey Epstein case, and they said if they really want to solve this case, go after the people on the peripheral of the Jeffrey Epstein case that once they're under oath in many ways will begin to talk about all the crimes that he had committed. And I think it's the same thing with this. If you can go around and maybe find people who were enabling this behavior and bring some sort of suit where they are under oath, even if it's a nominal fee, even if you're really doing it for a penny, just so you can get them on record, that might be a good way of circumventing this. Because now you're not going after the estate, you're going after the people who facilitated the abuse. Now, I have no idea if, again, the agreement they signed is also going to prohibit that, but it might be another maneuver you might want to use. Because, the estate has, $2.5 billion? If you can go after somebody that is not part of the estate, but is somebody that is somewhat of an enabler, then that might change the whole, ball of wax here. But I digress. Let's go a little bit further. In a 10-page ruling obtained by Rolling Stone, U.S. District Judge Hernan D. Vera granted the estate's motion to compel arbitration, finding the arbitration agreement included in a 2019 settlement with the siblings was enforceable. The four siblings had argued that the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act of 2021 invalidated the agreement, but the judge said the EFAA didn't apply retroactively. Because the arbitration provision was executed before the effective date of the statute and after commencement of the parties' dispute, EFAA does not apply. Although the allegations are horrific, the court is without discretion to do aught but enforce the language of the arbitration clause, the judge wrote. Go down further here. It goes on. I'm going to have to, I didn't make this big enough. I'm going to go kind of pull over here. It's going to change a little bit. Then I go back down. It's disappointing, but not surprising, that the decision on whether the Cassios were duped into signing an unconscionable agreement with an arbitration clause will be made by an arbitrator rather than a jury of peers, Cassio family lawyer Howard King said in a statement shared with the Rolling Stone. The family had hoped the court would allow for a public trial over the decade-long molestation of the Cascio siblings by Michael Jackson and the ensuing cover-up by his advisors. Instead, the family will seek justice from the dark confines of a private conference room. The other thing that I'm worried about is the state trying to pull, technically you broke the agreement, which I don't see that. I think they broke the agreement. I don't even know why that it's valid, seeing that technically, in my humble opinion, of course, that they were the one that essentially broke the agreement. But, to ask for their money back, which hopefully they don't do. Hopefully they have a little bit of sense that, you want that. I don't think even Michael Jackson's children want to see that. But we'll have to see. So it goes a little bit further. The Jackson estate has vehemently denied the siblings' claims. Lawyer for the estate did not immediately reply to request for comment on Thursday. Frank Cascio and his siblings, Dominic, Marie Nicole, and Aldo, filed their trafficking lawsuit in Los Angeles federal court last February. They alleged Jackson groomed and brainwashed them using his wealthy celebrity status and network of employees and advisors, according to the complaint. Jackson met the brothers and sister through their father, who worked at a luxury hotel Jackson frequently visited. After gaining the family's trust for gifts, declaration of affection, and sustained attention, Jackson allegedly isolated the children from responsible adults, applied them with drugs and alcohol, exposed them to pornography, and then abused them individually. This is a common theme as more and more information comes out that Michael Jackson would do this. Again, a case that I have covered, and it's part of the Nocturnal Admission series. It's episode 2. And we discuss another case that's very similar to this. It's a case of Jack Walls, who was a Boy Scout leader, who did many of the same things. He would ply his victims with drugs. He would also bring in women to essentially service these children. He would create this environment where, like Ron Zonen said, it would be nothing but chaos. And then he would essentially, he also had a club, by the way, just like Michael Jackson's Applehead Club. He had his own club. So again, Boy Scout leader Jack Walls, if you want to look him up, there's a whole bunch of information on him. And the other thing that's rather telling in that case is that Jack Walls also had some of the boys testify for him who were also abused. So what he did was he convinced them that it was they really needed to do and pull together, that this club was they were one for all and all for one sort of thing. And several of the boys who were abused testified for him. And one of the boys, his name is Heath Stocks, who knew Jack Walls for years, was encouraged by his parents to testify, who also thought Jack Walls was a swell guy, and they testified as well. Unfortunately, what happened after, because Jack Walls was found not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, he was acquitted of the charge that a 15-year-old boy brought against him, and the town rallied around him and essentially harassed that boy and called him all names and did lots of awful things. That kind of sounds familiar, don't you think? And they did that, and then eventually what happened was that Heath Stocks, who again one of his abusers, he was in his 20s and in college. He came back to visit. Jack Walls essentially got a hold of him, but during that visit, the parents were beginning to get somewhat suspicious, and the mother happened to walk in on Jack Walls with Heath Stocks, who's in his 20s, and began to put the pieces together. Now, again, when we think of the Cassios and we think of Eddie Cascio talking about how he was in, to 19, 20, and Michael Jackson was still abusing him. Again, this case is right. So people say, Well, Michael Jackson didn't abuse. No, Michael didn't abuse adult men. Michael Jackson was into power and control. And when he had a victim where he could control that victim, the age began to not be as important as the fact of the control. And, that's why when he was with Lisa Marie Presley, there wasn't really, he would leave for, days upon days and hardly even talk to her because she was a woman that was not going to be controlled. And I think that is what Michael Jackson operated. The other thing I've mentioned before in several podcasts is that I think Michael Jackson, because he was so intimidated by his father and beaten and abused and threatened and all the things, the awful things that happened to him as a child, I think he gravitated towards children and people that he could control because he was in a situation when he was 9, 10, 11, whatever, that he could not control. And anything where there was a power dynamic, Michael Jackson would shun. And that's what I think a lot of his abuse came from. But anyways, Jack Walls, it's a great story. I think if you want to see the similarities, like I said, I did a video on it from Nocturnal Emissions. I'm going to probably do another one, an updated video as well. I listened to a podcast that went in depth on this. And again, the parallels are even further. But you can look that up and you'll see so many of the similar parallels. But anyways, going back to Heath Stocks in that story, so once Jack Walsh found out that Heath was going, it basically told his family, he convinced him that he needed to kill his family and protect Jack Walsh. Heath Stocks, who at that point was totally just damaged and in trauma, he actually did that. He went back and he shot his mother, father, and sister on the instruction of of Jack Walsh. And then another boy came forward, and this is after that murder, by the way, because another boy who was a relative of Jack Walsh, who lived across the street, once that story about Heath Stocks came out, he got so panicked. And Jack Walsh contacted him, kind of hoping for the same thing. He ended up grabbing a shotgun, taking Jack Walsh to his parents with the shotgun put to Jack Walsh's head and made him confess, which he did do. And unfortunately, that particular boy, his name was Wade Knox, ended up committing suicide. So this is the trauma we're dealing with. And when you have to deal with a Grace Rhuwamba who's sitting there and, essentially shaming individuals for speaking, she doesn't understand how far this trauma can go. And then she has a group of sycophants that will lap up whatever garbage she puts forward. But again, I digress. Let's go to the next slide here. I'm going to zoom in again. I think I need a new prescription. I think what was funny? I'll tell you a quick story. I want to say about 2 years ago, my eyes were really, maybe even longer than that now, getting wonky, and I couldn't read as well. So I didn't have eye coverage or whatever. So I went into a place and I paid for the exam and all that. And I paid a little bit extra because I really wanted to get this done. And I was buying reading glasses. They were like $125 off the shelves. And I said, well, I should get the correct, glasses that have usually one eye is stronger than the other. So I go through all this and I had jumped through a whole lot of hoops. And then the doctor comes back, the optometrist, and he says, I got good news and bad news. I said, well, tell me the good news. Tell me the good news first. He goes, the good news is each of your eyes is exactly $125. He goes, the bad news is the reading glasses that you've been buying are actually exactly what you need. So I paid for this eye exam and I was using the correct prescription, which I thought was rather funny at the time. But I think I need to go back and relook at that. So let's go further on the Rolling Stone article. I'm just going to check the stream just to make sure everything's running correctly. You never know with these things. I've had so many bizarro things happening with streams, and who knows if this file will play. Let me go quickly check. And it looks like it's going fine. Awesome. Okay, let's get back to the grind here. Okay, it reads, Michael Jackson was a serial predator who, over the course of more than a decade, drugged, raped, and sexually assaulted each of the plaintiffs, being somewhere as young as 7 or 8. The 23-page lawsuit said the filing alleged that the abuse occurred over extended periods in multiple locations worldwide, including during visits when Jackson and his children stayed at the siblings' family home. Excuse me. The lawsuit is a desperate money grab by additional members of the Cascio family who have hopped on the bandwagon with their brother Frank, who was already being sued in arbitration for civil extortion. The family staunchly defend Michael Jackson for more than 25 years, attesting to his innocence of inappropriate contact. Marty Singer, a lawyer, attorney Marty Singer, man oh man, what a credent. In my humble opinion, of course. Marty Singer, a lawyer for the Jacksons estate, previously told Rolling Stone this new court filing is transparent forum shopping tactic in their scheme to obtain hundreds of millions of dollars from Michael's estate and companies. What's interesting is I wonder if he's the same lawyer that attorney John Branca was referring to, because he got advice from a lawyer saying that if the Cascio, this is before they actually all this went down. This is after leaving Neverland. Stated, if the Cascios or if these individuals come forward, and I am paraphrasing here, the estate is over, Michael Jackson's legacy is over, and the business is done, sort of thing. So I wonder if it's the same attorney that's now saying this is just an extortion attempt. How dare they want to be treated correctly? How dare they actually want to, be compensated for their injuries correctly? This is almost a $2.5 billion estate that has made money, in my opinion, on the backs of victims, and we're sitting there arguing about, oh well, how dare they? That's just ridiculous. Let's go see if there's any more to this article, which I think there is. It's the last part, I believe. And it's nice and in focus here. The Cascio family previously referred to themselves as Jackson's second family in media interviews. They were among the pop star's most ardent defenders during his criminal trial, which ended with an acquittal on charges of child sexual abuse in 2005. Jackson did settle a different civil claim in 1994, remaining his innocence, as well as another civil claim he settled with Blanca Francia. But again, I digress. After Jackson's death in 2009, Wade Robson, a choreographer and director, and James Safechuck, a writer, actor, and director, stepped forward with claims Jackson molested them in the 1980s and 90s. Sometimes during overnight stays at Neverland Ranch, they detailed their allegations in the 2019 documentary, Leaving Neverland. According to the Cascio siblings, the documentary deprogrammed them and forced them to recognize for the first time that Jackson's actions were wrong and severely damaged them. This people don't realize is very typical. So you now have other people that are basically describing in detail what happened to them, which is essentially what happened to you. And you're finally willing to say, well, wait a second, I'm not the only one. Or, you begin to understand the full extent of. And now when I mentioned that the Boy Scout leader, Jack Walls, and many of the boys, some of them, not all of them, because some of them were actually, again, part of this club, and there was basically group abuse going on, but some of them weren't, and also thought they were the only person being abused. This is not like a revelation that someone like, say, Aldo Cascio watched the documentary and then finally just had enough. And the other thing is too, there becomes a point where it's like, everyone's tiptoeing around the obvious. So you have someone is probably abusing people, and then you kind of just, you don't want to speak. And this happens in families, by the way, where you have a family member that maybe has been accused by somebody else, and then they tend to, rally around that family member and defend them. But then after a while, that begins to wear thin, and then people begin to talk amongst themselves and realize it's much more. It goes a lot further than they think. So hopefully the Cassios come out okay in this. I think it's disgusting that they are still trying to enforce this agreement where they can't speak about their abuse, even though the one good thing happened is they did get to speak about it in several interviews. My suggestion would be is get people that know the family that can speak on their behalf. I'm going to be going into Taj Jackson a little bit further on, and I have some ideas about that. But let's go to wonderful Grace. This is one of the few times I would say it's better not to have Grace. Let's go further. So Grace Rhuwamba. They say that the deepest cuts from those we love. I stayed in the home with Michael and the kids. I witnessed their bond firsthand over many years. The Cassios were among the first he turned to when over 70 sheriffs raided Neverland and his life was torn apart by the same depraved and recycled allegations. 2 months ago, headlines and photos of Michael Jackson appeared along the Epstein files, millions of released documents that show zero connection. The Cascio spent over 20 years defending Michael against these same allegations. Now they ask us to ignore the entire public record and instead imagine Michael secretly brainwashed all 5 children in the same family for decades. This is a profound betrayal. Grace, shut up. With all due respect, shut up. Can you do that? Is that a possibility? Fermez la bouche. Shut thy mouth. The reality is that this is my opinion. I cannot see this woman not having seen things that are questionable. In the last video that I just premiered, where these 2 boys were reenacting this bizarro, bedroom play or whatever it was, Grace was getting the kids from Michael Jackson's bedroom. She didn't see anything. It reminds me of Dottie Sandusky. Dottie Sandusky, who in many interviews, it was said that these children were screaming in the basement, and that Dottie Sandusky was just whistling to, oh well, let me just do the housework while these children were being abused, and she denies it. Obviously, I don't know what they're talking about. My husband was wonderful to these children to this day. By the way, she reminds me of a Dottie Sandusky. I like to call them victim shamers, people who think that, I was around. Let me tell you this. If most family members do not know that abuse is happening, a mother, a father, a sibling, etc., then, that can also mean a babysitter might not know, or maybe does know and is just turning a blind eye. My question is she being paid anything? This is a question I don't know. I'm asking a simple question. Is this woman being paid anything by the estate to come out on Instagram and make these claims? Or I shouldn't say claims, to make these criticisms. Oh, Grace. Let's go further here. This is brought to you by the Leaving Neverland Reddit, by the way. I got a couple of things from there. And let's take a listen to wonderful Gracie. Let me go here.
Every time I grew impatient or frustrated with something, Michael would remind me, let it breathe, Grace, let it breathe. The recent Cascio family interviews hit you with graphic, confusing, and improbable claims. That is their power. But now that the shock has worn off, it is easier to look past the parade of horror stories. The contradictions and glaring omissions come into focus. Let me start with some context. We were at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas when the authorities raided Neverland. Michael was so shocked that he took out his anger on his hotel suite. The management and security told us to leave. No major hotel in the city would take us. Marie, Nicole, and Aldo, 2 of the 5 Cascio siblings, were in Las Vegas with us for the filming of the One More Chance music video. 2 days after the raid, I flew with Michael to Santa Barbara, where they processed and booked him at the county jail.
Is currently being transported to the Santa Barbara County Main Jail to be processed and booked. We expect that he will post bail and turn over his passport at that time.
The media coverage was relentless. The humiliating mugshot of Michael was everywhere. When we returned to Vegas, the pursuit for Michael was so intense. At red lights, our security team would jump out of their car and confront reporters trying to interview Michael. In traffic, helicopters followed us from the airport, broadcasting our movement live on radio and television. People came out of the woodwork to catch a glimpse of Michael or just to wish him well. Then, we learned that someone connected to the charter company had installed hidden cameras on the jet that flew us to Santa Barbara. They were shopping the footage for over $1 million.
And then somebody had the unmitigated gall to shop those tapes around to media outlets in order to sell them to the highest bidder.
To Michael, this was confirmation that everyone was out to get him. He was devastated and withdrawn, and he became deeply suspicious of everyone inside and outside his camp.
That was a clip from Grace Rhuwamba discussing how poor Michael Jackson was, angry, and he destroyed a hotel suite, which essentially did nothing to him, by the way. And that the Cassios were nice enough to let him stay during this particular time. So that must mean the Cassios, everything they say now must be lies. Because, people aren't nice to their abusers. That never happens. The girls that get abused by their fathers are never nice to their fathers before they come forward, and even after they come forward. The last case I mentioned about Jack Walls, the Boy Scout leader, again, like I mentioned, these boys came and testified in his defense, just like so many people did for Michael Jackson. And one was even nice enough, using Grace's brilliant logic, to kill their own family to protect the Boy Scout leader. So Grace, I know you probably aren't the brightest bulb, but the reality is that is not uncommon. Stop shaming victims, you piece of victim shaming scum. Did you understand that? And again, I would love if somebody brought a lawsuit up on this woman and her enabling, in my opinion, of course, behavior, to then go now and say, well, I can't believe they come forward. Shut up. Just shut up. You have no idea because you weren't in the room, or maybe you were, who knows, when Michael Jackson was abusing these children. Your good feelings, your vibes, all the wonderful things. It's like these people just can't get over the relationship. Oh, I was connected to Michael Jackson. Oh, I was his nanny and babysitter. If you think Michael Jackson gave 2 shits about you, I'm sorry. I hardly doubt it. He would probably thrown you under the bus as quickly as he could if you became a annoyance to him. So wake up. My advice is start repenting for your awful behavior. But let's have a little bit of a fun take here. Let me go further. This was an old 80s movie called Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I heard a rumor that it's going to be remade with Gracie here, and the movie will be retitled Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Brain Dead, because that's essentially what Grace is. It's kind of brain dead. You know, this sycophant who I'm sure is part of all the wonderful sycophant groups online that essentially congregate with each other, and she gets to, every so often say a nice thing and get a cookie. But I digress. Let's go to the next person on hand. Again, I want to thank the Leaving Neverland Reddit. I was going to pull this up a different way, but unfortunately, I didn't have time tonight. So let me go further into this. So Taj Jackson, wonderful Taj Jackson, did a or an update on his series, and the first thing he said is no longer calling it a documentary or docuseries. Taj has decided to call the project a series because he feels the word documentary no longer carries the integrity or rules it used to, or just spitballing here, or he realized that if he calls it a documentary, he might be setting himself up some legal obstacles. My question for Taj is the estate paying you in any way, shape, or form? Are they paying you, I don't know, dollars, cryptocurrency, I don't know, ding-dongs, whatever they may be paying you? Are they paying you in any way? Because I would assume if they are, and you're putting on a docuseries before the civil trial comes through, you would think you would wait till after the civil trial. You think you would say, you know what, well, let me make sure I'm getting all the information. Because I remember Taj Jackson once stating that if he had even like a scintilla, a little bit of a doubt about his uncle's culpability in sexually abusing children, that he would never defend him. Never defend him. You think he would want to wait till the civil trial because there could be information coming out that maybe he's never seen before that might give him that doubt. Or maybe he'll see a video like we just described in the last video about Michael Jackson in his camcorder, Home Movies in Sun City. Maybe he would see that and say, gee, you know what, maybe I need to rethink this. Because what I'm getting from this is that he's going to interview a lot of people that knew Michael Jackson. He'll probably interview a lot of people that maybe knew Wade Robson or James Safechuck, or do kind of the square one thing and interview people that said, I know I met Jordan Chandler. Granted, I was wearing a Jackson's Victory Tour jacket, but I overheard that somebody said in a classroom, down the hall, and I heard through a window that Jordan Chandler somehow admitted that nothing ever happened to him, and he said in front of a group of people, but no one ever came forward. Basically starving college students didn't come forward to a tabloid and say, hey, I have a scoop. I'm going to class with Jordan Chandler, and he just admitted nothing happened. You would think that the Michael Jackson estate would have pounced on that. Would have pounced on it and said, gee, oh my word, that's unreal. I wonder if she ever went to the Michael Jackson's people when she overheard that story. Hearsay. Double hearsay story. But I digress. He views the series as unique because it tells Michael's story through Michael's own lens and the perspective of the family and people who actually knew him best, rather than the outsiders reading about him 20 years later. I don't care if you knew Michael Jackson. I don't care if you're an appendage on Michael Jackson. The worst people to ask about this is the family. They're the worst people to ask because they already have a view of that particular relative. And that's many times very hard for them to shake. And like I said before, a lot of times the last people to find out are the people in the family. It took Heath Stock's family to get killed, by the way. years when he was in his 20s for that to come forward, and then they ended up getting killed. So this idea that they know him best, you know the side of him that Michael Jackson was showing you. You don't know the predatory side because Michael Jackson wasn't preying on Taj Jackson or 3T. No. He had a specific type, and most of those types had no DNA relation whatsoever, at least as little as possible. So what he's going to do is bring a whole group of people. They're going to praise Michael Jackson, how wonderful he is, and let's go victim shaming again. My idea is that we need to now start a counter series done by independent investigators that will now start interviewing other people that will hopefully come out at the same time. That we can say, well, here's Taj Jackson's magical mystery tour, his fantasy, and now here is the reality. Because I think what Taj Jackson is doing, who's also a CSA survivor, and I'll never forget the time I think Taj Jackson was interviewed once. And again, I think I'm paraphrasing, where he said, well, I came forward immediately. I didn't wait. Which is another slap in the face to people who were abused. And most come forward 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, if they ever do at all. But Taj Jackson was a good person, and he came forward early. And the reality is, I think, what Taj doesn't realize is there were probably people that also called him a liar. Maybe not to his face. But there were people, obviously, that would call him a liar and say, you know what, I can't believe that person would do that. That's absurd. Taj Jackson must be lying. He must just want attention. He's the black sheep of the family that's not getting the attention. He's the one that everyone avoids. So he must want attention. I'm sure there were people that said that about him. But let's go further. The ultimate goal of the series is to cement Michael's legacy for decades to come, serving as an educational tool to debunk future lies and extortion attempts. Taj, if I challenge you to a debate, I would eviscerate you. It wouldn't be hard. It wouldn't be difficult. And the reality is you're going to put this out and no one's going to sit you down and say, Taj, gee, your uncle, you described it as slumber parties, but yet your uncle would find specific children and find ways to share a bed with that specific child alone all the time. And what Taj is going to do is what they've done now for years with the god-awful Square One and Lies of Neverland and all these other, Carl Douglas and all these other Mr. Smallcomb and these sycophants, and sit there and say, well, see, there was no train station. Or see, look, there is a discrepancy on the description of Michael Jackson's genitalia. Granted, his own attorney kind of says this is what caused the settlement, but everyone has it wrong except for Taj Jackson and his little army of trolls. He goes on, Taj revealed that his late father, Tito Jackson, was deeply supportive of the project. Tito allowed Taj to use his name to help secure investors and get the project off the ground. Were any of those investors directly, indirectly, through LLCs, through, airplane drops, bags of money buried under the ground? Did any of them have to do with the Michael Jackson estate? Do people need to go into your financials to find that out, Taj? Because if the estate has anything to do with this financially, I would assume that's really, really not good practice. To try to persuade a possible jury pool. But maybe not. These are just obviously opinions. Taj acknowledged that fighting for Michael Jackson's legacy so hard has caused him to drop the ball on his music career. His music career with 3T. 3 times terrible. But he feels his father would understand why he prioritized the series. Oh yes, everyone's running out to go see the next 3T concert. droves of people all over the planet hoping to see 3T reunite. See basically a boy band now in their 40s come in and sing substandard or really awful music. Yes, 3T is, I had to give up 3T. Oh, you poor baby. Oh, my word. You've lost pennies. That's funny. That's very, very funny. Who is supporting Taj Jackson, by the way? Does anyone know who's supporting Taj Jackson? Is he getting a stipend or someone still giving him an allowance? Or what does he do? I have no idea. I'm just asking questions. I have no idea what Taj Jackson does. I do know he shames victims, though. I do know that he likes to shame people who claim child sexual abuse. Yeah, I do know he's really good at that. Really good at that. Taj, you better hope when that shoe drops, that if this documentary comes out, you better hope that it's not as bad as I think it's going to be. You better hope that. And hopefully the estate doesn't pull a Scientology move where they get right to the date of the trial and then show up with a bag of cash trying to buy people off. My suggestion is if that does happen and they feel it's better to settle, that in no uncertain terms do the people of the estate have to make a disclaimer that everything that they said is 100% true and that Michael Jackson did actually abuse children, and that we feel it's the best route to take to now settle the claim instead of dragging this through a court hearing. And then anyone that says this was done under duress or done because, for whatever reason that is not to be believed, that is 100%, etc. For if that happens that way, I'm hoping they go to trial and all the discovery comes forward about Michael Jackson's, play dates. We'll put it that way. And he writes, he specifically wants to push against the narrative that Michael's family was the source of his pain, of escape for his downfall. He emphasized the outside bad actors, extortionists, backstabbers were responsible for hurting Michael. No, your uncle was responsible for hurting himself. Does your uncle have any responsibility at all, Taj? Does he have any responsibility? Is there even a scintilla of responsibility that you give to your uncle? Everyone was out to get him. Everyone was out to hurt him. Everyone did this and they did that. But yet he never has any responsibility for the disgusting decisions that he makes. It's all everyone else's fault. And not his family. His family wasn't the one that caused him grief. Oh, no. It was all those awful people saying that they were abused by him. That's really what caused him grief. Nothing to do with the drug use. Had nothing to do with him wanting to manipulate the media and have them be called weird and strange. It had nothing to do with Michael Jackson shutting out his family and having to make appointments to meet him. It had nothing to do with Michael Jackson essentially collecting people, using and abusing them. No. No, it's all everybody else's fault. He's to blame for nothing. That everyone else is the cause of his downfall, as we should say. Just unreal. It's amazing how people will go to the lengths they go. And again, I bring up Dottie Sandusky, who actually there's a person, I've challenged the debate as well that never gets back to me. I forget his name. He's another annoying podcaster. It will come to me. But he defends not only Michael Jackson, but also defends Dottie Sandusky and the Sandusky. Sandusky is all made up. It's all lies and people just trying to extort Penn State and Jerry Sandusky and blah, blah, blah. All the same stuff. So again, none of this that's why this reminds me so much of Dottie Sandusky. Taj explains that he started blocking people more often to protect himself from lower frequencies. Oh my God. So if someone questions your uncle and actually supports the victims of your uncle, they're on lower frequencies. They don't have the higher frequency to understand that your uncle was a prolific child predator. They're on lower frequencies. That if I could just get up to that higher frequency where I could just live in oblivion and not look at things that are obvious and use logic and common sense, I would be able to be like Taj Jackson. Oh my God. Are miserable people who just want to spread negativity. He says that he's willing to talk and disagree with people, but as soon as you're nasty or mean or call me something, blocked. Sorry, he mentions that some people complain or he blocked me, to which he responds, yeah, you called me a liar. No, Taj Jackson doesn't want to deal with any pushback. Taj Jackson will go on and do interviews where it's nothing but a maybe, softball question that has a little bit of difficulty, and that's as far as he goes. The people that interview him should ask, hey, look, stop pretending that your uncle had slumber parties and start realizing that your uncle actually, had one-on-one contact with these children. And he's sitting there. It's so rich. You called me a liar. You're calling all these other individuals liars, Taj. Seriously, what is the IQ of these individuals? I would really like to get an IQ test on Taj Jackson. Seriously, you can't seriously be putting a statement out like that. Calling me a liar. Gee, I wonder why. The injustice of it all. Taj Jackson being called a liar. Oy vey. Let me go zoom in here. Taj mentioned that he learned Michael vibrates on a high frequency. So does John Wayne Gacy, so does Jerry Sandusky, so does Jimmy Savile, so does Roman Polanski. All these people they resonate on such a high frequency. Oh my God. It's pathetic. It's sad, Taj. This is sad. He vibrates on a high frequency of bringing people together and creating positivity. The series being crafted to reflect this, ensuring it doesn't drag him down to low frequency or miserable negative narratives. You piece of, you SOB, not SOB, POS, you POS. To sit there, anyone that questions your uncle and dares to want to support the accusers is on a lower frequency. But your uncle was on a higher frequency. No, your uncle was just high, Taj. Take out the frequency part. No, he was just high. That's what he essentially was. And what this does is it's almost like, he puts anyone that dares to support, and he's a CSA survivor, which is even, again, I can't get over this, that dares to say, no, Taj, we're not going to buy your bullshit. We're going to question things logically and look at actually the facts of the case. That they're on a lower frequency is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how much of a lower frequency you can be on, Taj, to defend a prolific child predator. I think that's probably the lowest frequency. Maybe that's as high as you ever got and you think it's a high frequency. I have no idea. The release window. The series will not be released at the end of this year, Taj states. It will come out next year in 2027. How convenient! Right before the February 2028 trial date. No. I can't, they're complaining about Netflix and their timing, but gee, this seems awfully curious. Again, Taj, you would think facts don't lie. People do, guy. You would actually want to listen to what happens in the trial. I don't even know if you've even fully watched Leaving Neverland yet. These people live in I've watched all those god-awful rebuttal videos that you guys put out continually. Granted, it was here's a bucket of popcorn and let's watch you have a good comedy night. But I watched all your crap. You can't listen or read the accusations coming from the Cassios or from Wade Robson or James Safechuck or Jordan Chandler. None of that. You just blissfully are blind and you just go in and all these guys. None of them. I refuse to. Tom Ezra. I refuse to watch it. Well, Tom Tom, time to change your depends here. You are representing the estate or representing the corporations of Michael Jackson, and I'm sure Leaving Neverland's going to be a pretty big part of that case. Don't you think you might want to watch the documentary? Don't you think that might be a good idea? Or Tom Mesereau, who went on with Jim Clemente and talked about how he's rather disappointed in the estate because they would just settle things and he really didn't like but then joins the team. And then right before he joins the team, the estate settles buys out 5 people's life rights to kind of keep them quiet. Oh my God. You would think once you heard that, Tom, you would say, you know what? I don't want to be part of this. I'm leaving. I have some integrity. I'm not going to defend this. Nope. PG keeps on going on more shows. But again, the reality is I saw Tom Mesereau in the last interview he did with Piers Morgan. He did not, and this is just my humble opinion, of course, did not look good. He did. The Tom Mesereau 2005 is nowhere to be found in 2026. I really do. I'm worried that by the time 2028 arrives, that Tom Mesereau is probably going to be wheeled around wearing a shawl and having a bowl of rice pudding at hand. But I digress. Reason for delays. He originally wanted to release it before the Michael biopic to answer questions up front. No, it was more than likely here's what I think. I think that the estate said, hey, look, Taj, I know you really want to do this, but what's more important is that we release this biopic because it's going to make a whole lot of money, and we don't want to be screwing that up, do we, Taj? And I'm sure, who knows, I'm assuming Taj probably will benefit from that, but maybe not. However, there was an internal concern that people would confuse writing history with the Michael movie. Yes, the $150 million back Lionsgate project is going to be confused with Taj Jackson's documentary. It's just, you can't make this up. Yes, everyone's, oh man, I thought it was called Writing History. Writing History. What a pretentious little turd. Writing History. Oh my God. No, I would call it Taj Jackson's Aesop Fable. Taj Jackson's fantasy movie. Especially since both were family led. Yes. Even though Paris Jackson comes out and says, and not my pony, not my show. It's being geared to specific people who just want to live in the fantasy. Yada, yada, yada. And then we find out that she gets basically some of her tattoos covered, and one of her besties, which is Omar Bhatti, has his tattoos removed and starts making a whole bunch of cryptic tweets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Taj checked his ego at the door and agreed to delay his project so it wouldn't distract from a conflict with the $155 million biopics starring his cousin Jafar. I call bullshit. He checked his ego at the door. Oh, yes. Yes. Why? But yet it's not going to be ready till 2027. So let me get this. Think this logically. You were going to release it this year, but Michael Jackson biopic sidelined it, but still not going to be ready in 2027. So what story is it, Taj? Is it's done and in the can and ready to go, or it still needs to be worked on? And none of that makes sense. It's kind of like, it's definitely contradicting himself. But he then writes, he notes the important things take time, comparing it to how Michael's movie took 7 years to make. It takes time. You don't want to rush it. No. It definitely takes time. You got to convince a whole group of people that they should be a part they should be part of this, Shamapalooza tour that you're going to put on. There are all these people, and all these people that are doing this. You need to really think about how is the public going to view you. That you are going out of your way to go on a series run by one of Michael Jackson's nephews to call people who are claiming rape liars. How do you think the public might view you? I don't think too fondly. I don't think they're too fondly. They might view you positively once it comes out, but if the trial takes place and the amount of information drops that I think might drop, then how do they view you? Do they view you as a hero or somebody who's an enabler? I think the timing's so important in this. Why not put your ego at the door and wait till after the trial, Taj? So it doesn't look like you're trying to influence a jury pool. Again, what needs to hopefully happen is we need to have a counter documentary with researchers and people that are willing to get interviewed, that are willing to speak freely about what is going on. I already know all the arguments, their narratives, their BS, the way they're going to paint it, the sodium amytal bullshit, there's no train station, nonsense, the description wasn't accurate. Oh, the civil trial shouldn't come before the criminal trial. And, what was he going to do? Oh, no. He had to settle. There was an insurance company. There was, a couple of gremlins that were running around Neverland causing chaos. I've heard all the nonsense. So it's not hard to combat this. The reality is that what they want to do is, like Tom Mesereau does, is take you on a magical mystery tour. Where instead of seeing what's right in front of you, they're going to take you on all the side roads and get you all sort of, oh, wow, I didn't know that fact. I didn't know that fact. Oh, my word, heavens to Betsy. What about that? That's what they're going to do, because you can do it with anybody claiming abuse. Because we're talking about stuff that went on 20 years ago. We're talking about memories that might not be perfect. We're talking about situations that might be hard for people to recollect. But the overall claim is valid. You can easily go in and find little pieces that you can knock down. That's what they do. They don't look at the macro, they look at the micro. And they continue to do that. And that's why my advice to the people that are going to be hopefully in the trial, remember that that's what Tom Mesereau does. And remember, he's no challenge. When you're telling not your truth, the truth, he is no challenge. He is literally a paper tiger wrapped up in really bad hair. That's what Tom Mesereau is. The fifth Golden Girl, the B. Arthur lookalike. That's what Tom Mesereau is. Don't be intimidated by that man. Just remember, he's going to take you on side roads, and you stay on the main road. Don't allow him to pull you off somewhere on some ditch and say, see, look, you said that there was a train station. Look, I have the zoning plans, and I have the plans here. How could you ever make a mistake like that? My answer, again, I said this in one of the last live streams. Well, when you are being orally copulated by someone who looks like they could be, Elizabeth Taylor's, twin, a lot of times you don't really thinking about where it's happening. You're just hoping it will be, essentially be over. And then you can go back on the rides. So, again, don't let him take you on side roads. Like, that's what Taj Jackson is doing with this garbage documentary. Okay, Taj, if you ever want to debate, if you ever want to get off your candy ass and actually debate someone that knows what they're talking about, I would love to. X spaces. You know people helping you. You just get on and I will sit there and debate you. And I won't even blink. I won't even be like swatting flies. Your stories are garbage. It's not hard to do. I digress. He admits to walking away from a lot of money for potential investors, distributors, money he actually needed because they would have compromised the integrity of the story. Again, I call bullshit. I don't believe you. Sorry. I don't believe that someone who's never directed anything besides a couple of videos, they're going to be clamoring to get to this. I just don't believe it. And if there are people doing it, then shame on them. Shame on them. Let's go further here. Okay. He knew from the beginning he could not partner with Academy Award-winning entities, Netflix or Amazon, early on because he would lose the say to ensure his uncle's story was told correctly. Or fabricated correctly. Take your pick. He absolutely refuses to let anyone freely edit the project after it's done, knowing that the story is told 3 times in the writing, the filming, and the editing. This is where people get sneaky and change narratives. Or fact check, Josh. Could that be it? Or fact check? Just saying. When the Michael movie was restricted by the estate from addressing the allegations, writing history became even more important. Chaz prefers not to use the word allegations instead of framing the series around Michael being a target who was extorted. I hope you put Jordan Chandler in, and I hope he sues you into oblivion. That would be my hope. These guys got to start getting a little bit more offensive. Saying, if you're using my name and you're part of this whole entity and you're connected to the estate in any way, shape, or form, then you are essentially speaking on behalf of the estate. That's how I would frame it. He wants to show the hurt and pain Michael went through, emphasizing that there was no proof of the allegations, but plenty of proof of extortion. The extortion claim was brought up and the extortion claim was dismissed, just like, well, Michael Jackson was acquitted on all 14 charges. 14 complaints, whatever the heck it is. These people were cleared of extortion. And none of it, besides the Chandler allegations, extortion was ever mentioned. Except for maybe the Cassios, where they're trying to use that. Taj does not expect help from mainstream media like Deadline or The Hollywood Reporter to promote the series, believing they will not promote anything positive about Michael, or they don't want to support child rapists, Taj. That could be it too. Don't you think it could be, gee, they believe that Michael Jackson, your uncle, was actually a child rapist? And they don't want to support that? And then only you know. Only you. You weren't in the bedroom. You weren't in the limousines. You weren't in the jacuzzis. You weren't in the child's home when this was happening. You weren't any of those places, but yet you know certainly that your uncle was being extorted and none of this happened. This is what is called victim shaming. I will say it again. It is called victim shaming. So he wasn't part of that, and some of it, he was just a little child at the time. Wouldn't even know anything. But yet he knows better than anybody. He knows better than anybody. So again, we have to have a counter narrative going on. Maybe we can get investors and we can get groups of people that will band around us to actually tell the other side of the story. I have reams of information about these men being harassed, threatened, bullied, intimidated, being called every name on the planet. I can't think of really very many, if any, other child abuse cases where the accusers were stalked, hunted down, called every name in the book, and had documentaries made about them, calling them liars, extortionists, using everything they could possibly do. I don't think I can remember any sort of situation like this that is approved of in civilized society. So maybe we need to go that route and show all the things that have happened to these individuals in the last 20 years that were done by people that are in your side of the coin, Taj Jackson, that are done by all your little sycophants and your little trolls armies. The Church of Michael Jackson has some of the most devoted followers. Compare it to Scientology. Devoted followers that will do whatever they possibly can to make sure that anyone who dares to question these allegations and support the accusers and the victims are shut up. And even the accusers themselves. So maybe we should go down that road, Mr. Taj Jackson. And we can show right before your wonderful series comes out how these men and women have been intimidated now for the last 20 years, you victim-shaming piece of human garbage. Maybe that's what we should do. Because I have a sinking suspicion when you came forward and you were believed that no one did that to you, Taj. But yet you somehow feel that you can do that to anyone that dares to question your uncle's behavior. You have the right to do that. It's time to get on the offensive, people. It's time to get on the offensive. And start creating media and start creating a series that immediately goes after these people. Tons of knowledge, willing to share it. I have no problem taking investors' money to do it, as long as there are some people that can oversee it. And this is not about making money, it's about spreading truth. Love to do it. Love to literally show all the wonderful, wonderful things your army of trolls have said over the years, Taj. That for some reason you seem to, it almost seems to be like propagated by certain individuals. So he writes, he heavily relies on the fan community, TikTokers, and younger generations to help promote and share the series once it drops. No, I think you rely on a lot of those people to actually harass, intimidate, threaten, you name it, Taj. That's my opinion. And I think by you fostering that, now you're doing it even more. Do you agree with all the information coming out that your uncle was saving children from the Epstein Island, that your uncle was fighting global elites, that your uncle was being framed by a Jewish cabal, that your uncle was trying to stop babies from being eaten, all these other bizarro theories that have come out, a lot of them by the same people you're talking about? Is that what you're trying to foster? Are you trying to foster a, what's the word I'm thinking of? A mob to go after people who are claiming they were raped, Taj? Is that your goal? Let's go further. I heard a rumor that Taj Jackson might be actually starring in a remake of Desperately Seeking Susan. But it will actually, the new one will be under Taj's stardom. I heard a rumor it might be called Desperately Seeking Attention, starring Taj Jackson. Because that's what Taj Jackson usually is looking for. He's looking for attention. I'm defending my uncle. Oh my God. You can't make this crap up, people. You can't make it up. It's just unreal the way this goes down. Again, I've never seen a group of individuals who were claiming that they were raped as children have to put up with this garbage. I've never seen it before. Taj, why don't you go and start a group for Roman Polanski? Why don't you go, I know that, like I said before, there's people that also think Jerry Sandusky was kind of, same thing happened to Jerry Sandusky, happened to Michael Jackson. He was fair. Why don't you go and start a group for them? Why don't you do that, Taj? You can continually start series about people who deserve to have a second look. Why don't you do that? Why don't you go up to a rape crisis hotline and you can sit there and convince the people that are on the other end of the line how much they're lying? Why don't you go and do that? Why don't you go do a march on, because Wade Robson was interviewed by 1 in 6, which is an organization that's, partly headed by, who was the actor from ER? And my brain is blanking right now. But anyways, they basically discuss male child abuse victims. And why don't you go in front of their offices, Taj, with picket signs? Because he interviewed Wade Robson. How dare he? How dare somebody that is an advocate for victims do that, Taj? Why don't you go and you can put your picket signs out there and talk about how your uncle was extorted? Why don't you do that? Can't make this stuff up, people. So let's go over here. So let me go over here. Ron Zonen was recently interviewed by a guy named Hassan Ali, who has a show called The View. And again, I recommend people go watch the full 3 episodes because you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. We're not going to watch the full extent of this. I'm just going to kind of fast forward a little bit through some of this. But what's important is confirmation bias. So what Hassan Ali did is interview Charles Thompson. Seems like Charles Thompson gave him all the talking points. Then if you interviewed Aphrodite Jones and didn't even ask the difficult question like, Aphrodite, don't you believe that Jordan Chandler was a victim? I heard that you were quoted as saying that you believed June Chandler and you thought that Michael Jackson didn't abuse Gavin Arvizo, but you didn't say that he was, not a child abuser. Didn't ask that question, of course not. You had Charles Thompson, Aphrodite Jones, and Hassan Ali, 3 people. Some would call it a menage a trois, but in their case, I call it a menage a deux, because that's essentially the brain cells that were expanded in those 2 episodes. And then he goes on to interview Ron Zonen. And seems to be somewhat, in my opinion, of course, I could be just misreading this. Sometimes that happens. Seems to be fairly aggressive with Ron Zonen. But let's take a listen. Oh, look, welcome to Klondike. See if we can skip that commercial. I'm going to go for it. Here, let me go. I'm going to forewarn you, the host of this, Hassan Ali, kind of reminds me, he kind of looks like Tiny Tim, a younger version of Tiny Tim. I think you might get the reference.
Hello and welcome to The View. In the last 2 episodes on Michael Jackson's legal troubles, we spoke to a couple of guests who believed that the verdict the jury reached in the 2005 case was the correct one. Today, in the spirit of even-handedness, I've invited a guest who believes that Michael Jackson was in fact guilty.
The spirit of even-handedness. If you watch the other 2 interviews, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There was no pushback with those 2 individuals. There wasn't any questioning, just, really? Oh, wow, that's intriguing. Really? Literally, Charles Thompson, basically, this man was his puppy dog listening to anything that he said. It's actually rather pathetic, but let's go further.
And it's not just any guest. Former senior deputy district attorney Ron Zonen was described by Michael Jackson's defense lawyer, Thomas Mesereau, as among the finest prosecutors he's ever faced in a courtroom. He tried the 2005 case on behalf of the state of California and has been kind enough to make time to speak to us today. Hello, Ron. How are you?
Good morning, or more accurately, good evening for you.
Good evening for me. It's very early for you. It's probably the only hour in which we could have done this program. So Ron, let me. Well, we're in an interesting position because obviously you tried a case in which I would have acquitted if I had been a member of the jury. But I do think that one is able to have civilized conversations about these things regardless. I want to begin by asking you how the last 21 years have been, ever since that case wrapped up. Can you just give me a potted history?
I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I don't really care about the niceties. He's basically a spider weaving his web, it seems like. Let me go a little bit further into this.
By his brother, we were able to corroborate. They had talked to us about a large collection of adult material, adult magazines that were found, and where it was found, and where it was kept, and the type of magazines that they have. And we were able to find those, and we were able to find the kids' fingerprints on those magazines as well. So they were where they said they would be found, and in fact, they were the same types of magazines that they said that they would be found. I thought that was uniquely corroborative. But we also had other circumstances. We certainly had his history of taking one child after another into his bedroom for extended period of times. It may be a weekend or a week, or it may be, as in some of those kids, for up to a year. But there was always a child that was sharing his bed for that time. I considered that to be corroborative evidence as well. They talked about the alcohol that was in his room and his constant drinking and giving alcohol to the kids. We were able to find that as well, the evidence of alcohol in his room. We found an empty vial of Versed, which is a drug. He, of course, overdosed eventually and died from a drug overdose, but he was addicted to those kinds of medications, and we were able to find that too. I thought that at one point he may have spiked one of the drinks because of the child's description of being very, very out of it, much more than you would have expected just from a glass of wine. So we were able to find that too. So I felt that there was corroboration in the case, that the significant corroboration would have been other victims coming forward. And they have since come forward since the trial has happened, but they were not willing to cooperate.
Just want to quickly mention, he mentioned the drug Versed. What that is a sedative. So what happens is it puts you almost like an anesthetic type state. So if he was abusing children that maybe was sleeping, he could do it while they were asleep or give them something that would put them in that state and then possibly abuse them without them even knowing. That's why he brought up that drug.
With us during the course of the trial. That was the biggest challenge that we faced.
Well, yes, we'll talk about those in a second. My question to you, when you talk about corroborating evidence, is I think you spoke in the Netflix documentary, The Verdict, and you mentioned, I think, Ron, that the kids, that the Arvizo kids had access to Michael Jackson's room and that they sort of knew the passcode of how to get entry. So, I guess I'm asking, what is the value of this corroborating evidence? You're saying, that they were able to identify where Michael Jackson kept his adult material. But all that really proves is that they've been in his bedroom, no?
No, I don't think so. Look, the defense in the case was, this is a man who suffered from a horrible case of arrested development, that he was really just a 10-year-old. He was actually in his 40s, but he was really at heart a 10-year-old. He was at his most comfortable when he was associating with children. If that's true, why is there all that booze? Why is he taking drugs? And why is there an enormous collection of adult material in there? That's not what you would expect of a 10-year-old. So I felt
No, I understand that point. I'm just saying, the fact that they were able to locate, you made a point about this. You said, what we found corroborative was that they were able to say where all this adult material was. But all that really proves is that they were there, right? That they were in the room. And
they were in the room. It proves that they knew where he kept his briefcase filled with material, and it proves that they knew where he had his greater stash of adult material in a different room. The question is, why would a child being brought into his room have access to that material? If he
But this is not what you argued during the case, Ron. During the case, you argued something different. You argued that everyone knew where this stuff was. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm asking the question.
I argued what? Say that again.
You argued during the actual case that everybody knew where this material was. So that's why I'm asking the question. It's not like, your argument during the case was that everyone on the ranch knew where this stuff was.
All right, I doubt that I said that. You would have to show me the transcript of that, because I don't know that everybody on the ranch did know that. The people who had access to his bedroom were his maids, Michael Jackson, and the boys that he invited in there. We weren't able to determine that anyone else ever had access to his bedroom. The maids who cleaned up, the boys who he entertained in his room, and that's pretty much it. We never had any indication that either of his two wives ever spent even an hour in his bedroom. We had no evidence that that was the case. So if you're saying that I said that everyone knew where the adult material was in the room, if everybody is him and the boys who were there, then that would be a correct statement, because I'm certain that all the boys who came into that room were entertained with that material. I doubt that the maids were. Now, they may have known about it, but we have no reason to believe that that's the case.
Well, okay, but I mean, well, you know, like, just because I think it's very important when you say something to actually substantiate it, you know, for me, you know, as someone who's asking the question.
However, Hassan didn't really substantiate or do any of that with the other guests. I find that rather interesting that he just let them run wild. But yet, with Ron, he needs to take it a step further. I find that rather interesting.
You know, I shouldn't, you know, shouldn't seem like I'm just inventing it. Here's what you said, right? You said, remember the open door policy that Mr. Culkins talked about. Anybody could walk in there. His children walk in there, the people, the staff who walk in there and clean his room. It had to be the case that every single person who works at Neverland understands that he collects material like this. Next, you go on to say, again, his open door policy, anybody in that ranch walks in there and sees this stuff, including his own children. He is simply not inhibited about hiding what he finds to be interesting sexually. Everybody on the ranch knows what's in there. Now, I would not have asked you this question had I not seen that in the Netflix documentary and had I not seen that in the transcript. So, you know, like, I mean, it's something, you were arguing something very different during the case.
If I was referring about everybody who came in there, then I'm referring to children. Would the maids have known about it? Well, quite possibly. The material kept in his room in a black briefcase, as I recall. Keep in mind, this is 21 years ago.
Yes.
It was in a black briefcase in his room, but that was a small collection of material. Our understanding is that he would collect material, he would put in the black briefcase, he would periodically funnel the stuff out of there and bring new material in. Magazines. Essentially, they were magazines with depicting women undressed or women engaging in sex acts. The rest of it was, I believe, if I recall correctly, in a different room. Certainly, everybody who walked in there in the context of being children were aware of that. That I believe completely. I don't remember at this point whether we had any definitive information about a staff member being a maid. Those were the only other people in there, of a maid knowing about that material. They may have, I just don't remember at this stage. But to the extent that everybody knew about it, to the extent that you're talking about children, and there were plenty of them over the years, it was a substantial number. They would.
But you also mentioned staff, and you mentioned everyone, right? So I'm just saying what you said. You know, like, I obviously don't know.
And like I mentioned, this is the tactic, the magical mystery tour. See, I just saw that you had this in there, and now you're contradicting yourself. So it must mean you don't really believe in anything you're saying. See, I caught you in a fib. Typical type of tactics that Tom Mesereau uses. This let's catch them in something. I did see it, but you happen to have it right in front of you. You happen to have it. It was a gotcha type thing, hoping that you could actually do what you just did. You didn't do that with Carl Douglas, though. Or you didn't do that with Aphrodite Jones. No, you didn't do that. But you're doing it with Ron Zonen. Someone I think already had an opinion and needed confirmation bias from two other individuals. But that's just my opinion, of course.
I wasn't around.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the context of that statement. It was 21 years ago. The best I can tell you at this point, to the extent of everyone, if it's children, and there were certainly an abundance of them, that I believe is a true statement. They would have known about it. Staff, to my recollection, was only maids, and a select number of them had access to his room. Now, there was a different room that had material in it as well, and it could have been more staff. I just don't remember at this stage.
Okay, and sort of the testimony of the actress Vernee Watson Johnson, who said that these kids visited her house and were all up in her stuff, and the dentist they went to see, who said that they had sort of rummaged through her sterile material. The fact that Star Vizo knew about the drawer where Michael Jackson kept his razors, the cupboard where he kept his pajamas. That's not convincing to you, as far as, you know, these kids just sort of having access to the room and looking around looking into drawers.
No, the kids did have access to the room, and I'm sure the kids did rummage around. Let me explain something that I did argue to the jury, and that I believed at the time and believe today. There was a level of delinquency that was encouraged by Michael Jackson of these kids. They behaved recklessly while they were there, and it was encouraged by him. He wanted their inhibitions reduced. He wanted them to be able to behave as if there were no rules and no responsibility. That was consistent with him sexualizing them. So they were up all night. They were out and about. They were drinking. They were doing whatever they wanted. They ate whatever they wanted. They drank whatever they wanted. They were encouraged to do that. And kids are kids. If they're encouraged to misbehave, they'll misbehave. And it could be probably anybody's kid. At the time they're ensconced in Michael Jackson's home, they're now separated from parents. And in most instances, it's parent. It's just a mother. There's usually no father in the picture for most of these kids. And that's pretty typical of pedophilia situations. They're looking for dysfunctional homes to be able to develop a relationship with the mom and no father in the picture. And they're encouraged to behave in a way like that because that's part of the sexualization process. So he now gets to the magazines. He now encourages to look at the nudity in the magazines. He encourages them to engage in sex acts.
And again, I want you to remember Michael Jackson's words. And this is what the host of this, the Tiny Tim lookalike here, doesn't seem to understand, is that Michael Jackson said he saw the face of God in children. Their innocence is an inspiration, but yet is creating an environment that goes exactly against that. He's creating an environment where it's chaos, where children get to go crazy. And the other thing he doesn't seem to realize is if Michael Jackson was he cared about children so much, why would he have allowed any access, whether purposefully or done without even a purposeful intent, of a child being able to find adult material? Remember, Michael Jackson was the innocent one. He was the one that couldn't think of a child in a way that didn't have them look innocent and all this other nonsense, but yet created an environment which was the exact opposite. That's what people have to understand, is the dichotomy of Michael Jackson. What he put out to the public was, I'm this innocent little cherub that runs around and just wants all these other little children to be innocent and have the wonderment. But yet when it was behind closed doors, like the video we just premiered, it was vulgar language, it was sexual innuendo, it was pornography, it was alcohol, it was drugs, and the alcohol's backed up by and drugs backed up by somebody that offended Michael Jackson in the past, and the pornography's backed up by Corey Feldman, and I'm trying to remember now. So many names have gone through the years, but Aaron Carter is the one that backed up the drugs and the rest of it, trying to defend Michael Jackson. So let's go further.
It's part of the whole process. So yes, the kids were rummaging around in the room, rummaging around in the house, and to a certain extent misbehaving, as were all of the kids who were on that ranch at any given time, because that's what they were encouraged to do. And nobody should think that that speaks to the character of these children. It doesn't.
No, and I don't say that it speaks to the character of the children. I never made that point. This is a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, or maybe even younger. So I'm not saying anything about their characters, and nor would I do that about a kid that age. I think that's worth saying right now.
No, but Hassan, you inferred it. There was that nurse or whatever, the dentist, that said Arvizo children did this, and there was another person said that the Arvizo, and he's going to go further on to this. It's basically saying that these children were wild and essentially, willing to, essentially lie about Michael Jackson. But you'll hear it.
It's my understanding that of the magazines that were recovered, there were 3 magazines on which both Gavin and Michael Jackson had prints, but that the prints were on separate pages, as in there was no page on which they both had fingerprints. I guess you still stand by the assertion that he was showing them pornography through these magazines?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. He was encouraging them to look at this material. They didn't rummage around and find it and then look at it, then quickly conceal it when he came into the room. That's not what happened. And I think you have to be uniquely naive to believe that that's what happened. All of the kids talked about this, and they do now. I mean, I suspect if you go talk to, what's his name, Cascio, who has now come forward with his own lawsuit against the Michael Jackson administration, you probably would get the same answers about it. I don't think that there was ever a situation where the kids were just rummaging around and looking at stuff without Michael Jackson there doing it with them. I also take issue with the question of whether there were fingerprints of both of them on the same page. Because we didn't find necessarily doesn't mean there weren't. I mean, fingerprint art is not an exact science. You sometimes find things and then you look a little more and you find more. But they found a huge number of fingerprints from the 2 boys, and they found fingerprints from Michael Jackson. And I think that what they said was, yeah, we looked at this material with him. I have no reason to disbelieve that. And I don't think anybody is under an obligation to automatically disbelieve anything these 2 boys said. I think that is an injustice.
You think that's an injustice? Okay. Well, I'm just putting myself in the position of a prospective juror, I wasn't there at the time, but I feel like, this is something that, I would have found it significant, but we'll agree to disagree. You would not have found significant the fact that this man who brings children into his bedroom for extended periods of time, and not just into his bedroom, but into his bed for long periods of time, is also a man intrigued by having this adult erotica surrounding him in enormous amounts. Somehow or other, that's not intriguing to you as well? No, it is. No, it is intriguing, and it's highly inappropriate. No doubt about it.
Does it suggest perhaps a sexual interest in these children as well, that he's using this material for purposes of sexualizing them?
How can you make that argument without any more proof than the fact that they were just there, and that that the pages had fingerprints on that separate pages had fingerprints of both? I don't see how you can make that argument conclusively. It seems like a leap.
I can make any argument I think is appropriate, and the question is, will the jury believe it? Will the jury accept compelling evidence?
Right, exactly.
Compelling evidence because I believe the testimony of the children was compelling. Now, there are people who will tell you you can't ever believe a victim of a sex crime. I have had that come across to juries all the time when I try those cases, particularly involving adult women, where you listen to the argument of the defense attorney in the closing argument, and you realize that the defense attorney has not conceded one single word that has come out of the victim's mouth, essentially telling them you can't believe a woman who says she was raped. And we're seeing that now.
No one is saying that. But no one is saying that, Ron. No one is saying that. No, I'm not. No one is saying that. But let's move on, because there are lots of other things to talk about. But no one is saying that, just for the record. During the trial, you'll remember there was this rebuttal video that was filmed in which the Arvizo family is essentially gushing about Michael Jackson, what a great guy he is.
I remember it.
Yeah. Now, when prosecutor Tom Snedden interviewed Gavin about the allegations, he said the acts of molestation, had they already begun by the time you did this video? And Gavin says, I think so. And the prosecutor then says, so in your mind, one of the things that you're thinking is they're doing this video that they want you guys to do so that if you ever told them the truth about being molested, no one would believe you. And Gavin says, yeah. In the court case, the timeline changes, and the boy alleges that the molestation happened after the rebuttal video. I've never understood the reason for that discrepancy. Can you tell us why the timeline changed?
I can. The timeline didn't change. He believes that he was molested before and after. He remembered with more vivid detail the events that took place after. He said in the early stages, that was usually accompanied by the alcohol that he was drinking. And he felt that he wasn't reliable in terms of his ability to be able to state what exactly happened. Everything was quite fuzzy for him. And it was his preference to be able to talk about the events that occurred after the video was made. He had a better recollection of it and a better understanding of it. But he believed that there were acts of molestation that took place before as well. That was an issue that we dealt with in the trial. And we were very aware of the fact that Mesereau was going to make a big deal about the timeline. And people afterward, I thought it was rather honorable of Gavin, even as a child, to be able to say, I'm pretty sure the molestations took place before that trip. I really can't describe them in any specificity. He was giving us a lot of alcohol at the time, and it really is kind of blurry. So he elected to be able to talk specifically about the events that took place afterward. We had every expectation that that would be something that Mesereau would be pounding on. And of course he did. But I didn't feel that I felt it was honorable on his part to be able to say, look, I just don't have an adequate memory of those specific events.
So the reason I ask is, we were told on this program by another guest that law enforcement had raided the offices of Michael Jackson's attorney's private investigator and also the offices of his personal assistant. And they found evidence that Michael Jackson had an alibi for when the original molestation was supposed to have taken place, and that's why you changed it. But I would like you to just respond to that, because you deserve a right to reply.
I don't remember that ever being a subject of conversation. We had, to be able to say had an alibi on a specific day would presuppose that Gavin actually knew of a specific day. Children rarely do. Children will say it happened over a period of time.
And the person that Hassan Ali got that information from is Charles Thompson. Again, when he was doing that interview with Mr. Thompson, no pushback. Probably just taking notes. But that's where he got that from, and that's why he has his little gotcha type question. Let's go further.
With my understanding of the evidence at the time.
An alibi over a specific period, I said, period. If I said day, then I misspoke. I'm not certain what day or period we're necessarily talking about. Children are rarely specific, even in terms of time frames. If it went on over a period of time, it was during a time that he was at Neverland with Michael Jackson. I don't know that he would have been in a position to be able to say it would be these days or this group of days or that group of days. I just don't think that would ever happen.
Has anyone actually made it to level 4 before? If you're slightly congested, use level 1.
Okay. So on the timeline of the actual case you tried, right? So let me tell you anecdotally that whenever I've spoken to anyone about this, the moment they learn that the supposed molestation happened a couple of weeks after the release of the Bashir documentary, that's the moment when people tend to shake their heads, right? So, I mean, we're talking about a period when the media scrutiny on Michael Jackson is dialed up to 11. The Department of Children and Family Services has been investigating him. He knows about it. Everyone with a television or an internet connection in the English-speaking world, all they can talk about is his inappropriate relationships with children, right? And it is then that he decides to molest a child. I mean, does that not seem implausible?
Not if you know Michael Jackson. Look, Neverland is a different.
The other thing that Hassan doesn't realize is this isn't the first time that had happened. In 1993, when Michael Jackson was being investigated and he was overseas and he had even more scrutiny put on him, he showed up with Eddie and Frank Cascio. And according to their claim that they were actually abused during that time, but Michael Jackson was bold enough to show up with two little boys and publicly display them. So yes, Michael Jackson is that brazen to do that. I don't think stupid, I think brazen.
Different situation than any place you've ever been. It's some 2,600 acres of isolation, protected by a wall, by a gate, by guards. And he has this large house with these two kids, and he's barricaded inside, and they're locked in. And even in his bedroom, there's a separate alarm system for anybody coming down the hallway, coming into the bedroom. I think that, and we've wrestled with that question. We had talked about that, and we knew that that was going to be an issue that would be brought up. And I think the answer to it is you just have to understand Michael Jackson. For him, having a child in his bed is irresistible, or was at the time. He's gone now, of course. And I think that opportunity and that child in his bed and the security of Neverland, the security of knowing you've got this group, this child in your room, in your bedroom, in a secured fortress-like environment with 2,800 or 2,600 acres environment where nobody can get to. I think he just didn't care. I think he didn't care. He was somebody who found it irresistible. He had a child. Child was in his bed. Look, we know the child was in his bed. We know the child was in his room, and he's still subject to the same scrutiny. And you have to concede that that is a true fact. So the only question that concerns you is, would he then touch the child who's already lying in bed next to him all night, every night? So if
would he be impulsive and stupid enough to do that at that moment?
Yes. But can't you say that of any child molester, impulsive and stupid? Any child molester knows that there's a risk of a child telling somebody what had happened, and they do it anyway. And they know that if the child does tell somebody and the police are brought into it, their life will change dramatically. All of a sudden, they're going to be dealing with a whole different world. We had a judge who used to tell defendants, your life has just gotten a lot more interesting. And he didn't mean that in a positive way. So, but every child molester deals with that. I've got a child. I have to convince this child to stay quiet about it. I want to molest this child. I want to touch the child. I want to have sex with the child. But I have to do something to make sure that this child never tells anybody. That's a risky proposition in general. And I would suggest that it's no less risky than what Michael Jackson did on those days that he had a child already in his bed. And you have to concede, he was already in his bed. That they never quarreled with. That there was ample evidence of proof, and no one ever said otherwise. Their defense to that was...
Did they ever?
I think to accept that.
Did they ever admit? I'm asking you because I don't remember myself. Did they ever admit that Michael Jackson and Gavin were in the bed together? I mean, because I don't know this. I know only about the Bashir documentary in which in which Michael Jackson states that he slept on the floor somewhere. I think something that Gavin corroborates. But has this been accepted?
I don't believe that they ever argued in the trial that Gavin was not in his bed. Just like they didn't argue that Ray Thompson was not in his bed, or Brett Barnes was not in his bed. Brett Barnes testified that he was for a year. They never said anything otherwise. So the answer to your question is, I don't remember if Tom Mesereau got up in closing argument and said, I concede that these children were in his bed, or just left it alone and did an argument. But he never said otherwise. He never said they were never in his bed with them. That was never a point of contention in the trial.
Okay. So so I guess, part of the problem that someone like me has with this is, you've said that he's so impulsive and stupid that he would molest a child right at the moment when scrutiny on him is at its highest point. It's dialed up to 11. But simultaneously, you also argue that this is some kind of criminal mastermind who hatches an elaborate conspiracy to abduct a family and hold them hostage. And it's just kind of like, it just sort of seems like, is this guy like a criminal genius, or is he a fool? Because you seem to be arguing both, really, over the course of.
Why can't Why can't it be both? He's obviously a very intelligent person. He created a remarkable enterprise. He was certainly a highly talented musician. He was very actively involved in the management of his own music and the management of his own profession. So he's certainly quite capable. But when I say stupid, I mean stupid in the context.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. If you want to, you can watch the full. He gets even more aggressive with Ron Zonen. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an example. And again, my advice is watch all 3 interviews. And you'll see how a lot of these people operate. They will kind of get what their thought process is confirmed, and then they will question people about the allegations. So I'm going to go and see if we have any questions, and we'll kind of wrap this up. But let's take a look here. I'm going to go back to the beginning scene here. Okay, so let me read some of your comments here, and then I'll go and see if you guys have any other questions. Let me go. Someone writes, Grace the nanny, who MJ apparently nicknamed Jungle Booty. Yes, we talked about that. A lot of his highly sketchy fans don't care. That's true. MJ fans misrepresenting facts. Shock, horror, yes, very true. Many of them dead Bill Bray. Yes, Bill Bray is an interesting character because I mentioned on one of my videos. Let me just make sure this is where I want it to be. Get rid of that. In one of my videos, that he actually was, there was a security guard named Jerome Johnson, if you want to look that up, Jerome Johnson, who stated that he overheard a conversation with Bill Bray and Michael Jackson. And Bill Bray was very angry with Michael Jackson because he had an employee he wanted fired. I think it was another security guard that maybe was giving him some grief. So what he did was that he overheard them talking, and Bill Bray essentially said to Michael Jackson, I went to the grand jury and lied about you molesting those boys, and you won't even fire this employee. And he overheard that. And according to an investigator, a private investigator, he said that to him was a smoking gun because I guess Jerome Johnson was a pretty straightforward guy, rather religious, wasn't one that type of person to be to lie and fabricate things. But I thought that was rather interesting. Jafar saying Michael too will include abuse allegations seems unlikely. They're going to have to be very careful again. I don't know what they're going to include. Maybe it's just going to be a passing thought. Again, this is why I think there needs to be a movement, a rally around these victims that will put pressure on Lionsgate and on these entities that will back these films. And for people to say, well, Lionsgate's made too much money on these, a lot of these companies right now are very, very will adhere to some pressure if need be. But that's what needs to happen, because if they do it, how dumb. The idea should be, if they were wise, they wouldn't even focus on that. They would focus on the second part of his musical career. They would go over the Dangerous tour and the History tour and all that, and they would avoid it. But who knows? And but it's probably going to come out after the trial if that stays on track. Martin Singer, any relation to Brian? No relation, but Martin Singer is somebody who a lot of people don't like, or I think I'm trying to think. I remember when Bill Cosby was accused, Janice Dickerson had some words about Marty Singer, and she was not pleased with him, and she thought he was a piece of scum. But that's, a lot of these lawyers, what can you say? Probably just hoping for a payout from the estate. Possibly. He was in the hotel screaming, how dare they try to protect children from me? Michael Jackson was a very narcissistic predator. He was pretty much into himself, and he surrounded himself with yes people and people that would continually tell him how wonderful he was. Michael Jackson is and no doubt, he is I could see him getting completely enraged over this without even questioning his behavior. Going to make a point. Good. Yes, I don't know. Grace, in many ways, is a piece of work. Again, I call them victim-shaming scum, is what I believe they are. And they're enablers and protectors. Obviously, we're all entitled to our opinions. To me, that is what she is. Again, you weren't there. Instead of saying, you know what, I have my opinion and I believe he wasn't guilty, but I'm not going to question these allegations because they are so serious, and I was not there during these specific allegations to really say 100%. None of them will do that. All of them are going to continue to kowtow to the billion dollars estate. You can never truly know somebody 100%. I don't care. Close, you might be with them, and that is my point. I've been saying over and over again. A predator is not going to show that side of them unless you are the person being preyed upon. Now, does that happen and the mask will slip? I think it happened with Jerry Sandusky and some other abusers. But in most cases, that's a rare occurrence. Usually it's only with the person they are focused. And that just doesn't go for child predators. That goes for predators in general. That they will, and that goes for wife beaters and just abusive people. They will look as sweet as pie, and then you see the other side and you realize, oh my word, how many female teachers have gotten arrested, especially recently, where they seem, teacher of the year, and seem like they are the most just loving, caring individuals and have a family and a supposedly happy marriage and, 3 children. And then you find out they're grooming a 12-year-old. And people I can't believe she would do something like that. That's outrageous. And then finally, if you find out that actually did happen. And the husband doesn't even know. So again, this is same thing. In the comments, good. I'm glad Aldo is popping off in the comments on Instagram. And I don't. How much are these people supposed to take? I understand there's decorum, and you want to be careful about what you say, especially because he is, he's under so much scrutiny. But with that being said, you can only put up with so much. And my advice is just be careful. I can do this because I'm an advocate and I am not directly involved with this case. And I remain autonomous for the most part, because I know that I'm going to say stupid things at times, or things that people might find offensive. But the idea is I'm trying to advocate for these victims in my own way that is somewhat, in my own, showing my own personality in some ways. And it isn't going to be clean. I'm working with the worst part of this, which is social media scum. So fortunately, it isn't you're not going to have the best decorum sometimes. Someone writes, Mike, I think Taj Jackson is not a bad person, but misguided one. He's trying to protect the Jacksons. I disagree. As soon as you actively go after people who are claiming child sexual abuse and you have been abused yourself, that to me does not ring a good person. What it rings is somebody that's self-interested and can't get over their own bias. You can defend Michael Jackson without attacking the accusers. That is definitely a way of doing it. I believe my uncle is in it because X, Y, Z. As for the accusers, they're going to say what they're going to say, but this is why I believe. Let me tell you about his character. Let me tell you what I saw. Let me tell you. But you don't have to go and say Wade Robson's an awful person. The Cassios are awful people. They're out just to extort and look for money, etc. You can defend the integrity of your uncle without having to go after the integrity of the accusers. And unfortunately, that's what has been happening for I don't know how many years now. And when you have an army of fans and sycophants, then that turns that into a mob. So no, I think he's like a bad person just in the sense of evil? No, of course not. But I think he's making bad decisions. And because of those bad decisions, I can look at him and say, this is not a stellar person. Tom Messer is an elderly man, and by 2020, he's going to be a little bit older as well. I just think that he is so keen on keeping that crown on top of his head, which is the 14 acquittals, that maybe he's not thinking so straight. He was a standard Darvo lawyer. Yes, attack the character of the victims rather than the allegation itself. That's what always happens, and it's easy to say money-hungry, extortionists, they're looking for this, they're looking for that. Exactly. And they, and some of them will attack the actual allegations, and they'll try to poke holes in it, which is going to happen. But a lot of them mostly concern themselves with calling every one of the accusers every name possible and continue to do it and get praise from the people that are running the dog and pony show. Taj wasn't around for Jordy. He never saw the abuse. Taj wasn't around for a lot of things. There's a picture floating around of Taj, his brother TJ, and his other brother 3T. And I think Jim Clemente kind of portrayed this picture inaccurately. His criticism was that there were other pictures. Michael Jackson was tearing TJ's clothes off, and he basically had next to nothing on, and he was, his pubic area was showing, and there was an inference, well, maybe he was abusing his nephews. That, to me, wasn't the problem. The problem was the poor judgment on Michael Jackson's part. Michael Jackson understood entertainment in Hollywood and how a lot of those pictures can be misused. And as somebody who's gone through it, my view is that's your nephews. You say, hey, look, guys, if you want to get really edgy, that's fine, but I'm not going to participate in this. I think that it's best that you don't do this because these pictures could be used in a way that might not be the best reflection on you. But he didn't do that. He joined in, and instead of giving them good advice and saying, hey, look, you might want to back off on this. And especially because TJ was 17 at the time. Granted, he wasn't a child. He was probably a senior in high school. But you still can say, look, as your uncle, I don't think this is a good idea. And I can't participate in this because it not only makes you not look so great, it makes me not look so great. And these pictures could find their way somewhere that we don't want them to be. And he didn't do that. And I think it was a lot of problem with Michael Jackson. He just did not use the best judgment. And as we last saw in that last video that we did, one camcorder, two boys and a monster, you could see how Michael Jackson, like Ron Zonen stated, was in about getting these getting people to act inappropriately. I think with 3T, with his nephews, it was more so because he was just, this is a person that had no, didn't really think, what was best for his nephews, more so what was going to be the most entertainment for himself. Because Taj never saw it, he doesn't believe it. I agree. I don't know if Taj saw anything. I'm not saying he did, but my view is that you need to stop shaming victims. You can defend your uncle without going after the accusers, and he doesn't do that. He goes, Wade Robson is you should know the full story about Wade Robson and what did he know Wade Robson when he was in his 20s? Maybe Wade Robson was a jerk in his 20s. A lot of people in their 20s are jerks. A lot of people, you look back at your 20s, a lot of times, you're sleeping around, you're cheating on this one, or you're going out with that one, you're arrogant. 20s is not an easy decade. Trust me, it isn't. And a lot of times people are not the best person they're going to be in their 20s. You're growing up, you're learning, you're changing. So maybe he did see some things that were kind of not the greatest, but I'm sure vice versa, the Taj probably wasn't the greatest in his 20s either. So it's again, you're still growing, not to say you're not in your 30s and beyond, but you're still in that sort of, your brain isn't fully developed so much. Son Ali seems like some sort of a fan. Son Ali, when you watch all those videos, and I encourage people to do it, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He was questioned, and he says, "What do you think? I'm some sort of mega fan of Michael Jackson? That's ridiculous." He essentially answered that question supposedly, but it didn't seem like it to me. Aldo has been pushed too far, especially with the death threats, especially. All of them have been pushed too far, but Aldo is, again, I relate so much to the Cascio family because they're an Italian-American family, and that's what I grew up from. And I believe them in so many ways because the biggest thing Italian-American families do, and it's pretty common throughout a lot of families, but so much more Italian-American families, you can't agree on anything. You're always arguing and fighting amongst each other and yada, yada. So to think that you have one Italian-American family that is going to agree to all extort Michael Jackson and lie in mass, all of them, including the parents, and then to put shame on the parents, that's one thing. And again, it's a big thing to essentially call out one's parents. It took me many years to call out my, I might have been sarcastic over the years, but to call out and say, I was not too pleased. But it's not something that's done usually. It's something that you're not going to put your parents in a position where they're going to be questioned and their judgment's going to be called into a public forum. And I just can't see that happening. It's very hard to get two people to agree, to get seven to agree on the same thing. And what they're agreeing upon is essentially agreeing upon doing something that is completely amoral. I can't see that happening. And you got to realize it's not just the immediate family; it's all the people that are around the family. So now you're not only making claims, but you have other people around you that you're involving in this. And most people don't have the stomach to do that and don't really have the will in many cases. You got to realize too, in 2020, I want to say 2025, maybe a year ago, they were being offered more money. So it wasn't like their state went back to them and said, "Hey, look, how are you doing?" They were like, "Oh, I think we did you wrong." This is according to the Cascio claims, obviously. So the estate might disagree with this. Just putting that disclaimer there. But the reality is that they had money in hand. So the estate was going to give them more money, but yet you're now going to all conspire together to even take it a step further and put out a lawsuit that probably has little to no chance of being successful. And if you don't think that their attorneys told them this, you're crazy. Most attorneys are going to have that discussion with their clients, saying this is going to be a long shot, but I do feel that you were not treated fairly, and maybe we can get a judge to see this. But I'm more than likely they had that conversation. And who knows how much more the estate, what they were going to say, we're going to give you another 5 years of payments. So another roughly $3 million each. Most people aren't going to turn that down if they are literally extortionists, if they are grifters, if they are opportunists. What an opportunist usually doesn't do is turn down money in hand. That's one thing an opportunist usually doesn't do. You're going to offer me another $500K, another $2 million, whatever it may be. Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. They're usually not going to go the extent of, well, yeah, I have a 1% chance or I have a 100% chance. Think about that for a second. I have a 100% chance of getting, say, another whatever million or whatever it may have been. Or I have a 1% chance of possibly being successful with filing this public claim, which is going to put public shame now on my family and my parents and might more than likely not be successful. And it might even void out the original agreement that we had. Most people aren't going to do that. Usually people that do that are angry people that have found out information now that really pushes them over the edge and says, you know what, we were duped. We were put in a position we thought we were being treated fairly. Frank, I'm sure, knows some of these lawyers, and especially Howard Weitzman, who was there forever, the late Howard Weitzman. Probably trusted them and said, you know what, they are trying to do us right. Maybe it's best that we don't come forward. It's just going to be it's just going to be more, struggle than it's worth. Let's just kind of do this off to the side. No one has to know about this and get on with our lives, which is fine. How a victim gets their vindication and gets their feeling of justice it's on them. But I think they realized that they were being taken advantage of, and that was the last straw, and decided we want people to know exactly what happened. And because there's now 5 of us, maybe this might put a little more pressure and we can actually get to in front of a jury. And they had also received the settlement. So that would be my take on that. But again, I never say I'm 100% certain on any of this. I always say about 99%. I think it's disingenuous for anyone who was not there to say I have 100% certainty. It's ridiculous. Remember, though, about the Jackson family, how the end of them worked? Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard. I guess, someone was doing the breakdown of the monies. I guess LaToya gets like 30,000. Jermaine gets so many thousand, and some other people get. So I guess Catherine Jackson gets like $65,000 a month, and then it's doled out. I thought it strange that, that LaToya Jackson got the bulk of it. So it's maybe she's being told to, well, here's $30,000, shut your mouth. Who knows? That's just obviously speculation on my part, but who knows? Stacey Brown has leaked out years ago about the state of the family finances being reliant on Catherine and Janet. Yes, there's no doubt in my mind. The people that claim that this is all about money are the ones that are taking the money and who have the most interest in what happens to the estate and what happens to their legacy. So that does not shock me. So I think we're good here. I want to thank everyone for watching. Usually these streams get more watches after it kind of gets put up, and for a second time. But I appreciate everyone coming in, and I appreciate if you watched our premiere. We thank you so much. Again, please encourage people to subscribe to the channel. I don't take money or donations or do any of this. But I do ask for people to help me out and build the channel, because this is not easy. This is not an easy thing to do with YouTube when you're talking about these subjects and you have everyone hoping you fail. So if you can get someone maybe that's listening to this wants to take up a challenge to get people to subscribe more to this channel, to mjvictims.com, which right now is Facebook. It's actually Facebook. Facebook.com/Wade Robson supporters. I have to get the MJ link back. For some reason, it's not linking correctly, but that's what njvictims.com is. This is a Facebook page I started years ago. And to the Instagram page and the X account. If you can get people to support Surviving Michael Jackson as well as the MJ Victims accounts, that would be much appreciated, because it's so difficult to get people to subscribe and to, push this channel. And I understand why. But I digress. You have a wonderful evening. As always, thank you for supporting our very, very, very small and new channel, Surviving Michael Jackson. Good night.